anytime you feel like you lack it, give it. Right. And so that phrase kept resonating and ringing with me during those low years. I felt like I was lacking a lot of things: passion, purpose, happiness, hope, all those things. But I just kept remembering that phrase: when you lack it, give it. And that became kind of the catalyst for what then happened for my career post the direct sales years, because what I felt like I was lacking was purpose. And so I just started asking myself, when have I felt most on purpose? When have I felt most passionate? And I'm just going to go give that, not even for dollars. I was just going on Periscope, teaching and doing anything that I felt I had value within me, whether it was skills or mindset or training. And that started to become the beginning phases of, you know what? I really genuinely love coaching.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich Show. This is going to be an episode with Mike Chu. And Mike Chu has been a coach of mine and a mentor of mine for a couple of years now. Really, since 2020, I hired his company, Champion Development, for his Health and Wealth Academy. And I'm still a client of theirs. It's helped me tremendously in business with my health and fitness journey, navigating through uncertain times. Mike is the CEO for 5 separate companies, and all separate companies, all 5 of them, have generated over 7 figures in revenue. So, of course, we go into best practices around business and starting up the business and pitfalls and mistakes and how to scale and how to grow. He is an expert at coaching mentors, fit pros. He offers different business coaching programs. We also touch on some somatic therapy and some breath work a little bit, because that's something that really has served me in the past through what Mike has offered. And Mike also gives away at the end of this episode and during this episode a free gift. So you're going to stay tuned, because he has a few hours worth of content that he's giving away for free on his LTV method, the lifetime value of a client method for retention, and also gives a blueprint away during this episode as well. So really action-packed with content, practical, tactical tools. Andrew, what were a couple highlights for you that the listener could pay attention to as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the business blueprint stuff that he talked about, I feel like we basically got a free coaching call out of Mike here on this podcast, which is awesome. And listener, you are going to feel that same way, because you could take notes, detailed notes. He really just opened up the kimono and shared a lot of his framework. So get your pens and pencils ready, or your thumbs ready to take some notes on this one. But beyond that, what just stood out to me is Mike's maturity. Some of the stuff he shared towards the end around somatic therapy and the breakthroughs that he experienced with his coach there, around his relationship with money and his father, and then also becoming a father himself. So those were some of the more touching moments that stood out to me, that just show just how well-rounded of a coach, leader, and mentor Mike is. So listener, get your pens ready, and let's get on with the show with Mr. Mike Chu.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm Mike Abramowitz. I'm here with Andrew Biggs, and we have Mike Chu with us today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. Mike, welcome to the Better Than Rich Show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, I'll tell you, man, I am just super pumped for our audience to get exposed to you, because I've mentioned you in several episodes about being my mentor and a business coach during the last several years, and supporting me on this health journey since 2020, and helping navigate some of the uncertainties that I had. When I specifically remember I was on a call with you when James was in the hospital. I'm like, Mike, I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. I've been so disciplined with all of my tracking and my workouts and the business and stuff. And like, my son's in the hospital. I don't know what to do during this unpredictable season. You're just like, just repeat after me. No matter what happens right now, I could still breathe, and breathe in and breathe out. And it was just like such like a beautiful moment for me to just capture that I can breathe. I'm alive. I'm here. And I've now, fast forward, I've hired my own somatic breath coach because of some of the work that you exposed me to. And it's been really transformative. So Mike, take our listeners through. We've known each other from the Cutco days, better part of about 20 years now. But can you take us through like your journey navigating from direct sales and now, if I'm understanding right, you have 5 separate businesses that have all generated over 7 figures in revenue. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So you went from direct sales, where you're just like, I'm in charge. It's just me, a solo show. I'm doing everything to 5 separate businesses generating those 7 figures in revenue. Can you take us through that journey, man? Whatever direction feels best.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the intro. Just quickly, just to that first point, and then I'll answer those questions. Sometimes I think as human beings, I just feel called to say this: we don't recognize the impact of individual little moments, right? For me, I was on a coaching call just doing the best I could in that moment, and my heart told me to tell you to breathe and remind yourself you can be okay. And here we are a couple of years later, and you're kicking off our podcast episode with that moment, and then all I remember, not all I was thinking about, and as you were talking about our path and knowing each other, is I remember you visiting me in East Brunswick, New Jersey, just cross training and field training on Cutco offices. And so sometimes as human beings, we forget to be present to just how impactful little moments can be in the long run. So thank you for bringing me back into that moment. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely, man. Those, by the way, you kick butt. I learned so much going cross training with you at the East Brunswick office in New Jersey with Rob Brandt and a couple other really great people. So lots of fun history there. But take us through the journey, brother.
We forget some of those moments. The journey was direct sales was everything I never wanted and everything I needed all at the same time, right? So direct sales itself was not something I thought I'd be good at. Like a lot of people, entrepreneurship is not something I thought I would get into. I grew up in a very traditional, mom's a teacher, my brother today's a teacher, my sister was a teacher. Like as traditional, I like to call it at least, that you could think a career path could go. So direct sales in many ways was nothing I ever thought I wanted, and so much that I very much needed. For me, it unlocked or exposed me to the world of entrepreneurship. I grew up very competitive. I was a 10-time plus national karate champion. And so I had that like competitive, want to achieve big things type of drive. But professionally, I kind of have the path of I'm probably just going to get a job and live life. And that's kind of what I thought. So after all the years at direct sales, I was feeling kind of empty, actually, if we were to go through the journey. And direct sales gave me so much that I didn't know I even needed: personal growth and impact, and it helped me become so much of the man, professional, and person that I was striving to be. And right when I was turning 30, around 30 years old, I felt like I had done a lot of those things, and I thought that at that moment, right, like the skies would open and I'd be like, this is all that I was meant for. I'm so happy now, right? And actually I felt completely the opposite. And I was starting to believe that my best days were behind me. That's kind of where I got to at that point. I busted my tail, I worked my ass off and all these things. And I was starting to believe maybe my best days were behind me. And that's where I kind of got into a bit of a low moment. And a mentor, Mike, that you and I would probably both share connection with. I remember through my college years being down in DC, Jeff Gamboa oftentimes would say a phrase: anytime you feel like you lack it, give it. Right. And so that phrase kept resonating and ringing with me during those low years. I felt like I was lacking a lot of things: passion, purpose, happiness, hope, all those things. But I just kept remembering that phrase: when you lack it, give it. And that became kind of the catalyst for what then happened for my career post the direct sales years, because what I felt like I was lacking was purpose. And so I just started asking myself, when have I felt most on purpose? When have I felt most passionate? And I'm just going to go give that, not even for dollars. And I just started doing like these free live trainings on social media. I don't know if you guys were on social media at the time when Periscope was a thing. Periscope was like live videos. It was a separate app well before Facebook stole it and turned it into Facebook Lives, right? But it was a separate app called Periscope. And it was really my first exposure to live videos via a social media platform. And so to kind of bring this first part of your question to a close a bit, I was just going on Periscope, teaching and doing anything that I felt I had value within me, whether it was skills or mindset or training. And that started to become the beginning phases of, you know what, I really genuinely love coaching. It was one of my favorite things to do in direct sales. I still genuinely love doing it almost like for free here on social media. And that began the first business that I was going to own and run post my years of direct sales, which has now turned into many different coaching businesses, agencies, consulting companies, et cetera, since then. So that's kind of the couple minute version of the journey of how it got into the chapter of my career that I'm in today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that, Mike. And, I feel like every single time I interact with you, it feels like no matter what the question is, Chu's got the answer. It's kind of how I feel. So I know I want to get into like tactics and how you're growing multiple 7-figure businesses and how you scale, right? The scaling mindset. But like, just to stick on this purpose question first, because ultimately none of that matters if you don't have that, right? Trying to build these big companies and scale these big companies without a purpose and without passion, you're not going to get very far. So if someone is listening and they don't know their purpose, or they feel lost, they feel disillusioned, or they're going through a tunnel or a dark period in their lives, how might someone go about navigating that? How might someone find their purpose?
Yeah, I have thought on that question many, many of times, and I don't know if I have the grandioso answer that might get turned into a book, but I can share what has felt really true to me and has helped a lot of other people get back on purpose a bit as well. And for me, I find that there's tons of exercises to discover your purpose, but if I were to boil it down to just a couple things, it's what can I really impact other people with? Right? It helps and serves others. Number 2, what really fuels or fills me up when I'm doing it? Because sometimes we can help other people, but it doesn't mean it brings us to life. Or there's things that really brings us to life. It doesn't mean we actually impact other people with it. And then number 3, we can get compensated handsomely for it if we're talking about professional purpose as well. Right? And so I have found when there's some sort of integration or collaboration of those 3 things, oftentimes it really brings me, at least, and I've seen other people, to life, which is oftentimes us living on purpose. And those answers feel true to me because I've been on the opposite side where I felt like I was doing something that made me really good money, but maybe it didn't bring me to life. Or it was bringing me to life, but it wasn't really helping other people. So I've seen situations where maybe only 2 of the 3 had a check mark next to it, and it still didn't feel in flow. It didn't still feel like I was on purpose. And so for me, I have found in my own life, when those 3 boxes get checked off, I'm operating with more purpose in my professional life.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So, listener, what can you impact others with? What fills you up, and also what can you get paid to do? And it's that cross section, that intersection, where you're going to be able to, at the very least, you're going to have clues, right? That's where you need to go digging and go on an investigative journey. Mike, I know you have a thread on this. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, real quick, because I want to get into the tactical stuff too. But Chu, think about it from this lens. I mean, you went from a lot of predictability of I'm doing really well, karate championship, direct sales, crushing it, and then you go in this periscope pit of uncertainty and unpredictability. And I think some listeners might be able to relate to that, where it's I have my steady, secure place that I'm in, but I have this other endeavor that I really would love to see turn into a profitable machine. Hence your purpose, purpose to profits, or passion to profits, right?
Yeah.
But there's this. I assume this voice, and maybe it's the critics, of watching from the sidelines, oh, he's just trying to do this, or can you just speak to that? Was this purpose that you got connected to a voice that was the voice of reason to have you continue to push forward when you maybe saw some of the critics or some of the skeptics or the haters, or, because I know the backstory there. There was some a little bit of tension, some bad blood, and, some different things of people just, people don't like when others are trying new things inside of, what's familiar to them. And it's a unique, I'm sure you were in a unique position. You could speak to however you want to speak to that, but I'd love to have it connect to a listener who might be able to say, shit, I'm being pulled in these different directions, and I'm kind of hearing these critics.
There's probably a lot of different threads and different directions that question could go. But I would say this, going back to Biggs's question and then Mike, yours, I do believe if the purpose isn't clear enough or isn't big enough, the haters can detract you really quickly. And so when, yes, I felt like there was resistance or haters or whatever it is that you would want to call it, as I was starting to step into that, I think what allowed me to push forward was that I wasn't purely doing it like this is the next professional path that I think I can make more money doing. And the reason I can say that is because where I was finding myself at a bit of a low point is the two professional like roles or gigs that I was doing before this. I was doing very much based on the numbers. I was doing very much based on like, ooh, I think that's a bigger financial opportunity. And while on paper it was, I actually found myself sometimes making either less money than I thought I was going to, or making more money, but unfulfilled. And that's what got me back to that low point where I said, if I lack it, give it. And I'm lacking purpose and I'm lacking passion. So what can I give? So I'm bringing it kind of back to both because, yeah, where there was resistance or haters or whatever you want to call it, if the purpose or passion isn't big enough, you'll more times than not get detracted. For sure. So that's the first part to the haters and resistance part. But what felt so right and felt so good about how I was launching Champ Dev and the coaching business at the time, Health and Wealth Academy, et cetera, is it truly did feel like it was rooted or grounded, or the come from, whatever language you want to use, was purely from a place of service and purpose and passion. And so I think that was the fuel that kind of initiated or ignited all of it. So I'm not sure if I answered all parts of the question, Mike, yes, and I can go deeper on different parts that maybe I didn't address. But that's how I would answer initially what I heard there.
I think it's a great response. I think it's because I just want a listener to hear that if you are navigating into some sort of uncertainty, being anchored to something is going to be really important, because if not, just going with what the critics say. There's a lot of noise in the marketplace. Change sometimes is hard, but it doesn't have to be if you could be anchored to something and rooted to something. So I would love to get into some tactical stuff, because building a business from scratch, building one business, nevertheless, 5 separate companies and being able to build them to multi 7 figures, I think is super impressive. So if you could get us started off with brand new concept. You have this brand new concept of Health and Wealth Academy, right? I'm assuming this is where things started. It's like, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I know what to do for my body. I have wealth, I understand business. Let me take the things I'm really good at, and now I want to turn it into a profitable business machine. What are some tactical action items that you did originally, and then with what you know now compared to what you did? What counsel would you give to someone's like, these are the things I did, but I would probably do it a little differently now with what I know?
Yeah, I was smiling and laughing as you're saying that, because you said Health and Wealth Academy was the first thing, right? And I kind of just agreed with you, because it was the first business that ended up being successful within the coaching realm that I was taking. But I forgot until you asked that when I was following that purpose and passion of like, what can I do to give back to the world? I actually launched, I think, 4 coaching businesses all at the same time. Because I was like, I can help people with all things. I had something called School of Duplication and Development, Fast Starter Initiative, the Recruiter's Blueprint, or something like that. Health and Wealth Academy wasn't called Health and Wealth Academy at the time, but it was basically called like the Peak Performers and like the Peak Performers Roadmap or something like that. And so I launched like all these businesses with the belief that like I'll make more money by having more businesses, because I can help this person with this and this person with this and that person with this and this person with that. And so I just want to share that, because it wasn't as like clean and simple as Mike Chu just knows how to pick a decision and pick a business and it takes off. It was a hot freaking mess when I first got started, which probably also would explain why I made $2,000 in the first 2 years as an online coach. I had one client pay me $2,000 in that 2-year period, and the rest were basically just like checking out free trainings and like asking me questions on the side. But it was like I wasn't getting clients, I wasn't making money. So I want to start with that, because it wasn't as clear and smooth as you might imagine. A lesson or counsel that I would offer would be 2 things. Number one, what finally changed for me is that I got out of my own head, or I got out of my own ego, whatever you want to call it, from all the success in direct sales. I had convinced myself I can be successful at anything now. I don't need help. I know what to do. I know how to make sales. I know. So for that 2-year period where I only made $2,000, I tried to figure it all out completely on my own, despite my hardcore belief in mentors are important and being coachable and growth is always important. In that specific area, whether I was being cheap or my ego was in the way, I tried to figure it all out on my own. So the first piece of counsel, when everything changed, I was laying on my couch right before the holidays. I had just met and hung out with a guy named Yaya at a dinner party. And so I started following him on social media. You guys might know Yaya. I was following him on social media at that point, and he was doing a Facebook Live with Sterling, who ended up being someone that I was like, I don't even know this guy, but I know Yaya, and Yaya's talking with him, and he's talking about how he can help you grow your coaching business. And so just on a whim, I applied and I was like, can you help me? And everything took off after that. So the first thing would be the importance of mentorship in so many different endeavors if you want to accelerate the path. And the second thing is focus, right? Especially tapping into a marketplace. A lot of times I think we think the broader our market, the more money we'll make and the more we'll grow. I have found from my experience, at least on social media, the more niche down you go, the faster you'll grow, and then you can expand or broaden your niche. And so one of the first things that I worked on with Sterling, he's like, pick 3, kill them off and pick one. And I remember giving him so much shit. I was like, no, I will make more money if I just have all these options. A part of me was like, I know better than you, even though I just hired him to be my mentor, right? And so I really gave him a lot of resistance. And he finally said, Mike, and I remember this part of the conversation, I still thank him to this day. He said, Mike, I think because of your past success, you need to rewrite or reframe your relationship with failure right now. And he was so right. I was so scared of picking the wrong niche. I was so scared of picking the wrong path. And he said, what happens? We pick a path and 60 days later, we realize it was the wrong path? Pick a different route. I was like, fine, you're right. And so I picked one niche, which ended up becoming the Health and Wealth Academy. And I shut down all the other offers. I shut down all the other marketing to all the other things I said and went all into just one. And the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Well,
those would be the 2 pieces of counsel.
it's great advice. And I know that, mentorship is something that, everyone, on this call and hopefully people listening, appreciate. Yeah. It's my understanding that are you working with Hormozy now? Have you guys partnered up, or I don't know if that's like,
no, we're not officially partnered.
Okay.
When he first started launching acquisition.com, our companies had me and him and his team around the companies that we had multiple conversations about the idea of it. And I had the privilege of meeting Alex a handful of times because Sterling was a mentor of mine at the time, and Sterling and Alex were close during that time. I had met Alex, or Alex had spoken at a lot of Sterling's events, but no, we never formally created any sort of official partnership.
Yeah, and I know it's a big deal, right? Everything that he does,
Sure.
It's you got to look at the numbers and everything, but just the fact that you're swimming in similar circles with these folks is just a
Sure.
hint to the audience, just how at the level of that Mike Chu plays at.
Sure.
I'm curious, because this whole coaching space is very interesting, and it's something that I've been really intimately involved in, I think, for the last 7 years or so. And I kind of equate it to like chess or learning Spanish or something. Like, the basics is kind of easy, to maybe like kind of get a few clients or kind of get your foot in the door or whatever. But these higher levels to scale a coaching company, because one of the things that I run into was, okay, me coaching people, trading time for money. Ultimately, what that equates to is, tapping out somewhere probably in like the 20 to 25K a month range or so, which is great, income and a great lifestyle. But it's not, something that, when you account for taxes and expenses and all of those different things, as well as how much time it actually took to run those calls, it wasn't exactly as abundant as I wanted it to be, Mike. And so what I've really loved about what you've built is you have systems and protocols and use this LTV method and this maximization model that I'd love for you to talk more about, because that's really where you've been able to scale these things and enjoy an incredible lifestyle and spend more time with your family and
Sure.
stay fit and healthy and travel and all to do all the things you do. So what is the secret sauce to actually building a successful coaching company from your perspective?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a secret sauce, but I do believe it's two things that I saw a gap in the marketplace with how most coaches were being taught to build their coaching business. So I might start going on a little bit of one of those rants we talked about earlier here, guys. So bring me back in if I miss one of these 2 points. But the 2 points I want to hit home on is what you mentioned, and that is the LTV method, which I'll start with. And then the leverage leader playbook that leads into the maximization model. So I'll start with the LTV method. I realized that a lot of the coaching space, especially online coaches, they market in a way that they think flashy, sexy will get them more leads. And it probably does right off the bat. Right. And when I say sexy and flashy, I mean I can change your life in 8 weeks. Give me 90 days for this, 12-week that. Right. And so that was really good to get leads. And I needed to learn how to do that to just first initially attract leads and attract initial clients. But then it kept bringing me back to the whole concept that there are only really 3 ways to increase revenue. And that is get more front-end clients, get clients to stay longer and pay more often, or increase average order, average customer sale. And so what I was realizing in how I was being taught to get clients at the time, it was very much I can help you lose 30 pounds in 12 weeks and change your life forever. In fact, I was looking at some of the copy, Andrew, that I was even being given on how to attract clients. And some of it said things like, after working with me for 12 weeks, you will never need a coach ever again. And so I took some time after I got, interesting, like you said, I got to about that 20 to 40K a month range. And I found myself feeling really uncertain, worried, overwhelmed, right? I was working all this time, trading my time for money, but I felt uncertain if it was really scalable. Would it really lead to the lifestyle and the freedom, time, location, financial freedom that I wanted? And I started to kind of have that moment in the mirror with myself. And the answer to that question was, shit, I don't think so. I don't think this is leading to where I really desired or thought this whole coaching business was going to go. And that's when I realized that I was only tapping into one of the 3 ways to increase revenue, and that is continuing to get more front-end clients, which then starts to feel like a revenue revolving door, right? You get clients in, they leave, and you're back at zero. And it's kind of that 30-day monster where you start back on day 1 every month being oh man, we're back at zero. Can we get sales again? And so that's when I started. It wasn't called the LTV method at the time. I just basically revamped or renovated from the inside out how I wanted to grow and run my business. And I didn't believe that I was going to change people's lives in 12 weeks. Did I think I could have a great impact on their life in 12 weeks? Absolutely. But could I look them in the eyes and say, if I were to see and run into you 15 years later at a grocery store, that I would be able to stand there with pride running into you 15 years later saying the time we worked together, I know is still having an impact on you today? I didn't feel confident that I could have that type of moment if I was only working with people for 12 weeks. And so I went back to my karate days and I was I didn't become a black belt in 12 weeks. I became masterful at karate over a decade. And so then it brought me back to most things that I became great at took time. And if I want to help my clients experience something great, why am I trying to promise them that'll happen overnight? And so I started to change how I laid out the roadmap and the track and the curriculum and the path that I wanted to take clients on if they so chose, which leads to, on the business side, it leads to what I call high ticket MRR. Right? I think a lot of people, when they hear MRR, or monthly recurring revenue, they automatically think that they have to go the low ticket subscription model, $47. But even that, then you need 1,000 people just to make some really good money. And so the path the LTV method leads to is high ticket MRR, which allows for compounding and stacking of revenue. And literally putting the LTV method in place is what allowed me to finally break the 40K a month ceiling And we broke 80K a month just a couple months after putting that in place, which then grew to 100, 200, multiple 100K a month business. But the second part of the rant I want to go on is that the LTV method, but you're still delivering everything one-on-one, will still feel like it has a bandwidth or capacity issue anyways, even if you are compounding and stacking revenue and clientele. And so that's what then made me have to look at the other side and say, do I want to trade all my time for money, or is there a way to create unlimited predictability through leveraged leadership? And so it caused me to change the way I look at like delivering an outcome to people, which led to, for what I've shared with you guys before, the 4C freedom formula. And how can I deliver a roadmap of delivering a roadmap of success to people through building a great community with a course, with calls to support people. And yes, coaching is still a part of that, but it's not just you're paying me just for coaching, right? And as long as I can deliver the outcome and the result, but potentially in a leveraged way, then it's able to scale as well. So I can go into either of those in more detail, but that was like, you said, like, what's the secret sauce? And to me, I have found that those two things unlocked me from being stuck at 20 to 40K a month to then within 24 months of putting those two things in place, we were doing 200 to 400K a month, just for context. So it literally allowed us to 10x revenues by putting those two things in place.
Well, one of the things that you taught me, and this might be behind the paywall because I pay you and your company a lot of money,
Sure.
but if you want to riff on it, do you have this like
everything? Yeah, I'm here to give all things.
You have this stacking approach. It's like if you're from 0 to 10K a month, these are the things to focus on. If you're from 10 to 30K a month, these are the things to focus on. 30 to 50K, 50 to 100K. If you could just like, if it's top of the dome or whatever you want to riff on, it's like if you're in the 0 to 10K, these are your big three. If you're 10 to 30K, these are your big three. I have it in my journal, but instead of me going back and trying to find that journal, I know exactly which journal it is. I know exactly where
Sure.
it is, but I'd much rather have you just jam on it.
Sure. I might not say it exactly how I said it to you last time without a resource in front of me. It's kind of my checklist to keep people focused on as well. But I'll speak to that in kind of two ways, right? I started to realize that less is more if I'm going to help people get great results. And this ties to your question, Mike, in the sense that I used to think over-delivering is how you give more value. But in the world of coaching, people care about results at the end of the day. And I was starting to find that I was trying to over-deliver, and my interpretation of over-delivering was giving more information, giving more assets, giving more resources. But we all know that oftentimes an overwhelmed or a confused mind actually just says no or takes less action. So that frames into your question, Mike. So why I started to say, okay, at this level, if I was to eliminate all the extra stuff and this person was to just focus on this 1, 2, or 3 things, it will get them the results that they need. Or in other words, I was starting to ask myself, what are the least amount of things someone could focus on that'll get them the biggest result fastest? Then we can focus on the next thing. And it kind of brought me back to my karate days where we literally had a manual and it said, when you're a white belt, here are the 5 things you need to learn to be ready to test for orange belt. And then orange belt, here are the 7 things you need. And so it kind of like made me just focus on those things. To you in particular, right? Like the first $10,000, it's person, right? Product, problem. What person do you help? What product are you going to do to help them solve one specific problem? Right? And that's it. Just prove that you can help that one person with one problem with one product. And most people could get to 10 to 30 to 50K a month faster by just continuing to get better at those 3 things instead of trying to offer multiple services to multiple people with multiple products. I'm evidence of that. As we said earlier, I was trying to launch 4 coaching businesses all at the same time, and I made significantly more when I just honed in on one type of avatar, one person, with one main problem and one product that they were going to serve. Right. And then it continues to grow from there. At certain points, then it's just, okay, price. How do I find a way to leverage my price higher? Am I really charging what I'm worth? Do I really have a process in place? Right. And so on and so forth. And so at each stage, there are different things that I've found that if they just focus on those couple things, it takes them to the next level, versus if someone tries to focus on all of those things at the same time, it's oftentimes what causes them to feel stalled, even though they feel like they're working on more things.
And
does that answer the question you're asking?
100%. Okay, I'm sure Biggs has a follow-up. The part that I wanted to just have you click on was, at some point you went from a solo show to, I'm going to add on some staff. And we like to follow the same, I'm similar as you as Dan Martell, to buy back your time. It's like, all right, let me offload admin first. And then once admin is kind of offloaded, then we'll offload, maybe it's marketing, and then maybe it's client success, and then it's sales, and then it's leadership. So it's like, what are the stages as the 10K, the 50K, the 100K, where it's like, all right, these are the hires, these are the who's that I needed to surround myself with as the company reached some of these thresholds. And that required you to, I'm assuming, think differently as you hired that staff too.
Yeah. Two things are coming up for me, Mike. One, I'd love to any listener who would get value out of, like, at this stage, focus on this. At this stage, focus on this. I can just give to you guys for the show notes at the end a link to what we just call our Champ Dev roadmap, which is what you're referring to. It's basically, it says, when you're a solopreneur, focus on this. When you're a leverage coach, focus on this. When you're we just have different levels and titles for it. It just made me realize that's what you're referring to, and I can get that link over to you guys as well. I believe at the different stages, hiring is a bit of a science and a bit of an art. And what I mean by that is, what I love about what Dan Martell does is he makes it a bit of a science. I forget the exact language that he uses, but there's basically this part where he's like, if you're feeling stuck, you probably need to hire for sales. If you're feeling stressed, you probably need to hire for delivery. If you're feeling stalled, you probably need to hire for admin. He does a really good job of, like, and what I love about reading Dan's book, and he just takes big concepts and makes them feel bite-sized and simple to follow. So that's like the science side, where it just says at 10K hire admin, at 30K hire delivery, at 50K hire sales. That's the science. And then I do think there's a little bit of an art side, and the art side is just reflecting on, what am I best at? Just because the playbook says replace sales at this size, at this level, sales might be something that I am like, it's my zone of joy, or it's my zone of genius. And maybe I shouldn't give that up quite yet. But you know what doesn't give me as much joy and energy? Admin, tech, ops, delivery. And so I do think there is that art side as well. And so when I'm coaching clients, I'm like, this is what the textbook says we should consider hiring now. But knowing you, Sally, you actually love coaching. Like, it is the whole reason you got into this. I think removing yourself from delivery this early might actually make you a bit miserable. I think we should actually kind of substitute what the playbook says and hire for a messenger person or a chat specialist first. And so, to answer that question, Mike, there's the science side to it. And I think people need to slow down and reflect on, like, what gives me joy versus what doesn't give me joy? What gives me energy versus what's stealing my energy? And what's really stopping me from what's the bottleneck from scaling at that size?
Well, it's such a great answer. And this is what I mean, listener, by Mike Chu has the answer to every question, because it's just like, no matter what, especially in this industry, man, I just feel like there's so much. And by the way, this is industry agnostic. Everything that he's sharing, applies to any sort of business. But you just have so many things dialed in that I think is really, really cool. And by the way, whether you're in coaching or not, if you're listening to this, I can't even tell you how many people come to me all the time and say, how'd you get into this? I'd love to do this. I'd love to leverage some skill that I have. A friend of ours is like, I'm trying to help him start a consulting company in the food industry space, and we're going to try to position him as a thought leader in, food manufacturing plants. Right? He runs like 1,000-person team and knows exactly how to, run a really successful food operation. Why shouldn't he have a podcast about that? And start take on consulting gigs and stuff like that. This is a space that's only going to grow. And if you're listening, this might be something for you to consider, even if you aren't in the space yet. One thing that comes up for me is like just how dialed in some of your concepts are. And I think that, you said less is more earlier, and I can totally relate to that, where, we have like a 12-week program that we have put people through called Operator to Owner. And it's almost like I try to teach everything possible that I know about business in 12 weeks, Mike.
Yeah.
And it's a natural impulse, right, to try to do that. But I do
Sure.
sometimes see someone's eyes go, wait a second, they glaze over and they're like, this just went from being really practical and tactical to like theory or concept, or it lost its potency because of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any sort of like, science or art to that. It's like, how do you kind of simplify things down? Or does it just take a lot of
Yeah.
thinking? And I mean, because like one of the things we're thinking
I
about is
do.
how to manage, when we think about business, it's like, okay, there's lead gen, there's sales, there's, kind of like onboarding, the first, sort of experience for somebody, a user experience when they're new. And then there's like retention and long-term value. And if you flip that
Yeah.
to the internal operation side, it's basically the same thing, right? You're recruiting, you're interviewing and hiring,
Yeah.
you're onboarding staff, and then you're doing daily huddles and management on an ongoing basis. So I'm trying to take all of that and collate it into something that actually can be packaged in a way that makes
Yeah.
sense. But sometimes it's tough, man. I mean, I think our program is
Yeah.
great and it's doing really well. But I know that if we're going to scale and continue to scale and be able to hand it off to somebody else, it's going to need to be simpler, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have a bit of a methodology
Okay.
to that. So I can first share just how I've done it, and then I'll share with you something called what, why, how, now, wow, right? And I'll share with you what that means and how you put that into place. So whenever I've done this for any of our programs, we actually start with the end in mind. Pretty common phrase that all of us have heard before. But when we start with the end in mind, I'm starting with two ends in minds. What is what we call the ultimate outcome? If someone was to work with us for multiple years, like college, right? Freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, what's the ultimate outcome? So let's use weight loss as an example. The ultimate outcome isn't just that they lost weight, but they feel confident that they've lost the weight, are starting to look the way they want to look, and feel confident that they know how to move forward and actually keep it off. Okay, so then we take that and we say, okay, what's the initial outcome of the first phase? Like, how would we measure someone's on track with that? I always reference back that I think my brain thinks this way because of karate. Black belt's the ultimate outcome, that whether you took karate or not, everybody knows what a black belt is, right? But having done karate for all these years, I also know that you don't get the black belt right from white belt. You have, depending on what style and whatever, but you have orange belt or yellow belt or green belt or brown belt, blue belt. You have all these belts in between. So again, I'm asking myself, what's the ultimate outcome? Let's call that black belt. Then I'm asking myself, but what's the initial outcome that would cause someone to feel like I am on track? I'm getting so much momentum, kind of like a world we all grew up in. What's like a fast start result, right? What gets someone off to a fast start where it builds their confidence and their enthusiasm? So again, ultimate outcome, initial outcome, ultimate outcome, initial outcome. So I first get clear on those. Then, number two, I start working just on the initial outcome, that first phase outcome. And that's where you said, does it just require a lot of thinking? Sort of. And I sit down, but I try and do this with team now. So I'm not just sitting there like thinking on it. I try and workshop this. And essentially what we're asking ourselves is, from my own journey and the journey of others, what are the commonalities that when people did these things, it led to results? How can we narrow that down to less things, not more? What are the commonalities of almost everybody who got success? Not the outlier, not the anomaly, right? The majority of people, they got success, if I was to really boil it down, because they just did these two things. Let's use weight loss again. We have people that lose their first 15 to 20 pounds and they're not even in the gym yet. All they did was get clear on how much protein they're eating and how many calories they're taking in, and moving their body a little bit more now than they were. So that could just simply be steps, not even going to the gym, right? And so how do we get them a little more aware of what they're intaking and moving more often? So we try and narrow down those things to less things. So that's the how I've done it, Andrew. And then how we actually deliver this in a systematic way when you're building out like course material. The way I think about that is, first I ask myself this question. If someone were to go through my course and have no live support at all, would it or could it still lead them to the result that they want? And I ask myself that question a lot because I don't want my course to become too much just like a library of information. Like, could someone literally follow the course and it be actionable and clear enough that if they had no live Q&A support, no coaching, they could still get results? And then we deliver those course modules in the format of what, why, how, now, wow. So what I'm about to teach you and why it's important. That might be the first module. Then we clip to the second module. So let me show you how to do that exactly with a resource, with a checklist, with a whatever. Now that you know how to do that, what's the most important thing you do right now? Right? That's like the what action step. And then wow is we try and give them some sort of template or resource that causes them to go, wow, you made this so easy to implement, right? You literally gave me like a template of exactly what posts to put up, or you gave me 5 examples so I knew exactly what to look at so I could come up with my own. So what I'm going to teach you and why it's important, how to actually do it, but then now what to focus on, and wow, look at this resource they gave me, or look at this checklist they gave me that allowed me to actually get into action faster with more certainty. And so that's a bit of the template we take to how we're delivering on the actual material or curriculum we're giving people as well.
Thanks for so much detail, man. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Our operator to owner clients, thank you as well. They're like, oh wow, I'm going to get a lot of over delivery coming from Mike and Andrew soon.
We basically just turned the podcast into a free coaching call. So
I love it.
What, why, how, wow, now. I love it, guys. So if you're not, if you haven't simplified things down, listener, to that level of detail, and I know for sure, what, why, how. Yes, the wow and the now, okay, a little bit less so.
Yes.
So you say, okay, if you really want to get results, right? Not just teach information. Well, how are you gonna get them a result? How are you gonna get them across the finish line? Because what was the critique of Tony early on, right? Someone's like, you don't have an advanced degree, you don't have a PhD, and what did he say? I have a PhD in results, and that's why I can charge $100,000 for an hour, or whatever it is. So, Mike, what's going on for you, man? Because Chu is just rocking my world over here. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Can I add one last thing to that really quickly, Mike, before you go? You brought up Hormozi earlier, and one thing Hormozi has done a brilliant job in helping other people see is how to define what value is in his value quadrant in his first book, $100 Million Offers, right? And he said most people only focus on the top half of that cube, right? Increasing what one believes is possible for them and increasing the certainty that they can get there. But he said, where great marketers or great business owners really stand out is they focus on the bottom half of that value cube, and that is the decreasing. I'm decreasing the time between learning and result, and I'm decreasing the sacrifice or effort to get there. And so, Andrew, you said, most people probably teach what, why, and maybe a bit of the how, but I would argue the now and the wow is what helps add value on the bottom half of Hormozi's cube, right? Yeah, I'm going to actually decrease the amount of sacrifice and effort you have to put into implementing this, because I'm just going to give you the top 10 examples of other people who've got it, or I'm just going to give you the word for word example or the real template. And so you're decreasing that, right? And you're decreasing time then between learning and result. That's where real value is added, is at least something I've learned from just listening to Alex's book over and over and over again, that I think ties into what we just talked about.
Well, it ties in super well. The immediate thing that shows up for me is you share resources of what you're learning, and then I'll hear that. I'm like, all right, I guess I got to go get that resource. So you shared a $100 million offer with me a couple of years ago. I pick up the resource, love the book, watched his 3.5 hours of content, and then you said gap in the gain, Dan Sullivan. So a couple weeks, months go by. I'm like, all right, I got to get that one. Pick that one up. Transformative. Then you're like scaling up. Got that one. Love that book. Biggs and I and our management team or leadership team were devouring it, restructuring business. So my question is, what are you focused on now? And what do you think you might be focused on next? So that way, if I'm always a couple of steps behind you on some of these journeys of what you're learning, focusing on doing, implementing, maybe I can kind of peek behind the curtain and help our listeners do the same.
Yeah. The two books I'm studying this year, and I like to use that language studying because there's times where I'm just listening to a book just to listen to a book. but more in my 30s than my 20s. In my 20s, I think there was a lot of, look how many books I read this year. I read 52 books in a year and 125 or whatever it is. In most of my 30s, which funny enough, you could argue I also made more money in my 30s than my 20s, I sometimes will actually like really listen to 6 books all year, 3 books all year, but I'm listening to it over and over and over again. And I call it the Sports Center test. When I'm ready to move on to a section of a book, I think many of people who like sports have been up late at night in college and they're just watching Sports Center late night. And then the same highlight replay comes on again and you're like, oh my gosh, I've seen this one already. And it's kind of like, you know what replay they're about to show. So now it's time to actually turn the TV off and go to bed. Or now it's time to actually change the channel. That's how I've been studying books a lot over the last 5 years. I'll just listen to the same 4 chapters over and over and over and over again until I kind of know what story the author's about to tell. And that's my way of knowing I'm ready to move on in the book. And that's when I'm studying a book. So Mike, to answer your question, right now for me, my 2 big books this year are Think and Grow Rich and Buy Back Your Time. And I know you have both of them, so it's not a new one unlike some of the other books I maybe referred to you. Think and Grow Rich for me is largely because despite all of the success we just talked about, the company went from 2K in 2 years to an Inc. 5000 fastest growing company in America and has now led to other branched off companies and stuff like that. Last year was also really challenging for me. And for a while there, I was just blaming the fact that my dad died in early January. And there was an easy excuse to like feeling off a little bit last year. But then the more I thought about it, the second half of the year, despite my dad dying, my habits were also kind of shit last year. My like laser focus on where I was going for the next 5 or 10 years of my life were kind of off. And for anyone who's read Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill in his summary of 6 instructions, step number 1 is fix your mind on exactly what you want to desire. And I realized that after this like 5-year chapter of growing Champ Dev, I kind of was lacking a little bit of vision for what was next. I turned 40 soon. The business had just experienced all this stuff. So I was kind of like on the other side of a growth season. And I was lacking that like clear desire fixed in my mind of where I wanted to go next. And so Think and Grow Rich has been a big focus for me this year. And then Buy Back Your Time, because as these businesses grow, I also have a strong desire to launch a charity that we might call Champ Dev Charity. I don't know the exact name yet one day. And also, I want to start a YouTube video of me and Presley which we're going to start this fall, starting jiu-jitsu together and getting our white belts all the way to our black belts in jiu-jitsu. And so I want the businesses to continue to thrive and grow, but in a way that I'm buying back my time. So those are the 2 big books or things that I'm focused on right now.
Well, I love it, man. And I mean, this idea of studying books, right, versus consuming them, big fan of that. I love the Sports Center test. Kind of reminds me of like being home from school and you're like, sitting in front of the TV, watching the same reruns over and over. And you know the line that like
Exactly.
Stuart Scott's going to pull out or something. Well, cool, man. And just thanks for also being open and vulnerable. Just so I know, do you have a hard stop in a few minutes or can we go a little over? Okay,
Nope.
perfect.
Nope, we're good.
Because, we've really like cornered you a little bit and then and said like, hey man, give us all your business tactics here. And by the way, we love to do that because we know that adds so much value to the listener. And I also know that you have so much value outside of just business, right? Whether it's your journey with somatic therapy, how martial arts, has really changed you and helped you grow. And I'd love to just get some goods on the personal growth side from you to say like, how did somatic therapy change your life? Some people might be listening and say, what is somatic therapy or whatever? So help us understand some of the journey you've been on there and then all the way to, becoming a father, right? And taking that journey on because, part about being on Periscope in the early days and now being everywhere the way you are is that, I feel like I've been able to watch you mature, even though it's been from afar. I've seen you grow and mature and hopefully people see that from me too. And from everybody who's on this journey, you're somebody who's, I don't know if you still are not drinking, but you took some time off of alcohol. I'm over a year, removed from alcohol at this point. That's been a huge move. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on all this stuff, whatever direction you want to take it.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share on that because the business, I would go as far as to say that the business quantum leaps have been a direct reflection of my inner growth. And I almost felt like I wanted to tear up when you said you've watched my maturity from afar, because it really took me till about 37 years old to feel like I was finally an adult. Like I finally stepped into being a man, if I can just say that openly. I think growing up around alcoholics, um, I wasn't, I'm going to say I wasn't, as if like I was a victim to it. And I want to be very clear, that's not how I mean it. But I think a lot of my upbringing, or at least how I experienced my upbringing, is probably a more mature way to say it, did not create a space for me to do a lot of like owning my own emotional states. And so despite growing older in age, it felt at times like my emotional maturity was lagging behind. And there were times where I was like 24 years old, but then I would like have these like emotional tantrums or lash outs or tempers or angers that felt more like I was my 12-year-old self again. And then even by 30, I was reacting like a 16-year-old still. And so the maturity part really means a lot to me, because it's been a big part of my journey over the last couple of years. To answer some of the initial questions, 4 years this past summer without alcohol, which is also a direct reflection of the somatic work. I believe in something called the law of correspondence. And so many of us hear the law of attraction and everything like that. But the law of correspondence also states what we think, feel, and tell ourselves internally will create a direct mirror of our world externally. And so despite doing all the hard work through my 20s, I felt like I was still self-sabotaging so much of my life at times, whether it was relationships, whether it was my own finances, whether it was my own happiness or my own business growth, because despite doing all the things externally, I wasn't doing a lot of the things what you would call internally. And somatic work, from my understanding of it, I'm not a somatic expert, I've just put in 5 or 6 years of doing the work consistently, is the attunement or the healing of your nervous system and your body, right? Most therapy is oftentimes in your mind, which is also very valuable at many times in certain cases. But there's times where the body remembers what the mind forgets, right? And so you're only talking about it in your mind, and you don't remember that maybe you were made to feel not good enough or less than or rejected when, the kid in the cafeteria, or you failed your test, or your mom yelled at you, or your brother just, whatever. Like there's these little moments growing up that your mind oftentimes forgets, but your body and your nervous system remembers. And then we wonder why at 18 and 28 and 38, our significant other can make us feel like they weren't listening to us, and we lash out like we're 6 years old all over again. And I was doing a lot of that. And then you pair alcohol with that. Alcohol became an easy way to not attend to my own emotional states during all emotions: celebration, sadness, rejection, anger, etc. And so a big part of my journey was starting somatic work for about 2 years, and then realizing how much alcohol was stunting the growth in that area. And so I gave up alcohol forever at that stage as well, for many other reasons, but that was one of the big reasons. And I can kind of wrap that to 2 stories, Andrew. Business, we'll talk business for a second, and where somatic work has played a direct reflection. Because I think if I just talk about it conceptually, here we go, that sounds nice. Let me give you an example. My business did 93K, 98K, 95K, 92K, and I could not break through 100K a month. And the high achiever side of me was like, maybe I just got to work harder. Maybe I just got to find the right strategy. But come on, I was doing 98K, 92K. Like, is a little more hard work going to really be the thing that breaks me over? So I brought a business conversation to my somatic therapist, my somatic coach. And we're going for a walk in our neighborhood. And I remember halfway through the session, it just hit me. I felt it, like I felt the tension on my chest. I felt the tension on my body, that my dad used to have a lot of like what I perceived as like resentment towards people who made a lot of money. And specifically growing up in the 80s and 90s, he would make comments towards people who made 6 figures. Oh, freaking rich person, or da 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 da. I took that 20 years later, and my nervous system, my body believed that if my dad resented people who made 6 figures in a year, how is he going to feel about his son who might make 6 figures in a month? And so I literally didn't feel safe, if you want to use that language, to receive $100,000 in a month. I didn't believe it was worth doing. I didn't believe it was safe. And so I sat there with the somatic coach and we worked through it. And working through it for me means like actually feeling the feeling, realizing that I'm safe, realizing that I'm still loved. Mike, what we started this whole interview with, and I can breathe, even if my dad judges me for making 100K, and just calming my nervous system. And as the story would go, we literally broke through 100K the next month. And the crazy part is I've not fallen short of 100K cash collected a month. And I think we're almost at 3.5 years now or something like that since that conversation. So that's an example on a business side of like how making sure the mind and the heart and the body are all aligned leads to breakthroughs. And then the second one, growing up around alcoholism, I at times felt like I couldn't connect with my dad. I had a lot of tension with my relationship with my dad. And so how I interpreted that in my nervous system, because I like to be good at things. Like I hate failing and losing and that type of stuff. And so I felt really scared about being a dad. And the reason why is I felt scared I was going to fail. And so even though I had my first daughter, Mia, I was like not really owning being a dad. And I'm a little ashamed of that today during those early years, but I remember going on a walk with someone we're all affiliated with, John Vroman, down here in Austin. And I just broke down crying and I said, I know I love Mia, but I hate being a dad. And that hate was really rooted in the fact that I was scared of failing. I was scared of not doing great. And then once again, doing somatic work helped me fall in love with the process of being a dad. And now it's one of my greatest joys. I can say that with like true genuineness. Like it brings me joy when just a couple of years ago, I was running from it and it brought me a lot of stress. So long-winded answer of what somatic work is and how it's played out in my life. I could tell many stories like that, but that's been the experience for me.
Well, that's a beautiful two beautiful stories. And listener, by the way, if you want to check out John Vroman's episode, he goes on lots of passionate rants on about being a dad, and you'll get a ton of value from that conversation that we had with John. Mike, I just want to say a lot of what you're talking about here before we kind of start transitioning, because I want to respect your time. The one thing that wasn't mentioned here is the amount of discipline that you have brought to these practices. And I think somebody might be listening and saying, okay, just hire this person and I'll just stop the alcohol and I'll just stop this. But like you legitimately tracked and practiced the same rituals for 1,000 days and put these practices into place, put the disciplines in place between travel, ups, downs. That's, over 3 years of work. What might you say to someone that says, all right, Mike, I hear you. I'm going to kick it, but I also got to kick it while also anchoring in these new patterns of behaviors and owning through to this new identity. Because I know you do a lot of identity work too. I think this is a perfect tie a bow on the whole thing, because the identity piece is big.
Yeah, I think it is a great way to tie the bow. What I would tell a listener is that you don't need morning routines and evening routines to be successful. I like to get that out of the way first, because I think we sometimes overvalue something like a affirmation, like that's going to be the reason for success. But what one does need if they want something in their life is identity. And the way I would kind of summarize that is we don't get in life just what we desire, we get in life what we expect. And our expectations are oftentimes so heavily dictated by our identity, right? Think about years and years of culture, right? I grew up Asian, so there's all types of stereotypical jokes, but also feel true. Like I'm expected to be good at martial arts, or I'm expected to be good at math, or right? It's crazy how much culture dictates our expectations, right? Italians are expected to make great pizza or whatever it is. And so what I would tell a listener is that, no, you don't need a morning or evening routine to be successful. However, if you're trying to recreate a new identity and you have 1 year, 1 decade, or multiple years of a different identity stacking against that identity, you're going to need to rewrite a new track, a new belief, and so for me, that's why it started off as just a year and it turned into 1,000 straight days. And I don't say it because I think you need to do something for 1,000 days to be successful. I say for Mike Chu at that season of my life, I needed 1,000 days because I was trying to overwrite 30 years of like, you're never going to be good enough, or you grew up in a middle class Asian family, so you're supposed to be frugal, you're supposed to be cheap, right? I had to rewrite a lot of those beliefs. Then the tail end of before I started this, I had gotten divorced. My parents kicked me out of their house because they weren't proud. I was starting to believe that God didn't even love me anymore, right? And I could tell a whole story about that, but I was starting to believe that God didn't even love me. And so why did I need 1,000 straight days? Because I was like reinventing myself and overlaying a year, a decade, multiple decades of disempowering thoughts, beliefs, expectations. And so that's what I would tell listeners, that you don't need a morning and evening routine to be successful. But if you know you're in a season where you're trying to level up your identity or expectations, then yeah, your beliefs, your self-talk, your characteristics, who you're being, chances are that's going to need intense focus if you really want it to become who you are and therefore become the life that you're creating.
Well, thanks so much, man, and thanks for just sharing all about all the entire journey, right? Any struggles that you've had, all the way to all the successes that you've had. And listener, if you're listening,
Yeah.
that might be the most impactful thing that you hear today regarding your identity. And if you feel stuck, oftentimes it's really not strategy, that's going to break through for you. It really is your identity. So, those go in cycles, right? Maybe you're in a great period right now and you're on your grind. Perfect. Keep doing that. But eventually, what's going to happen is just like the Phoenix, it's going to be consumed and it's going to collapse and it's going to need to be reborn. And if you're not doing that throughout your life, man, I feel really sorry for you if you continue to have the same identity for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So if it's time, just embrace it and embrace that identity shift. Mike, we always ask our guests three questions before we head for the exits, and these can be quick hitting. But the first question is, what do you think the world needs most right now?
Emotional EQ. I think EQ gets a little over, like true emotional maturity and understanding, right? And specifically an understanding of how to attune and process what we're individually experiencing in our own emotional states.
That's great. I know you already hit on a few during the episode, but what are 1 to 3 books that you think people should read? We already hit on Think or Grow Rich, Buy Back Your Time. Is there another, like we hit Gap in the Gain, we hit on Scaling Up?
Yes, there's a lot.
So what would you say maybe 1 or 2 or 3 additional books that weren't mentioned already that you think really would help out some listeners?
My favorite book of all time is The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker, right? Because he prioritizes the reason we're doing it all, right? And that's we want to be happy. And I feel like the entire book basically challenges your thinking. Is it when I do all these things, then I'll be happy? Or is it learning to be a happy person will then create all the things you're saying you want? And for me, that book was very pivotal in learning to put my own happiness first as a way to therefore go create the life and the impact that I want. And so Happiness Advantage is actually arguably my favorite book.
Awesome. And the final question is, what does it mean to you to be better than rich?
To be proud of who you are when no one is watching, right? In the shadows, in the darkness, that there's a peace with your ability to be with yourself, to know yourself so deeply, the good, the bad, the ugly, that there's a peace with yourself. I think we all know many, many rich people, if we're talking about finances, that don't have peace with who they are. And so better than rich is a peace in your own heart with who you are as a human being and who you're continuing to become.
It's excellent. That's what I love about you, man. And you always bring the value every time we have an interaction. And, I know listeners are going to check out your Champ Dev gift that you gave us, which I truly appreciate. Thank you for allowing us to use that. And if they want to stay in touch, if they want to see what you're up to, if they want to continue to learn more, how could they, do that with you?
Yeah. We'll get you that link of the gift I'm referring to. There's also, if you are running a business, the system that transformed my business, you could go to www.champdev.com/free. Not sure if that's also one that my team got to you, but that's a free 3-part, like ungated, full training on my entire LTV method. And so www.champdev.com/free, 3-part full series, nothing held back on the entire LTV method. I'll also get that roadmap to you guys as well. But the simplest way to stay in touch for me right now is Instagram. And then it can kind of direct you to different free Facebook communities that we have, depending on how we might be able to support you. But just my Instagram at Mike2_Chu. There's a lot of Mike Chus in the universe, so it's hard to get just Mike Chu as the tag. But Mike2_Chu is the easiest way to just stay in touch and follow on Instagram.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for bringing the value and bringing just excellent content, energy to our audience. Yeah. And Biggs always drawing out the best from our guests for our listeners. So thank you, Biggs. And listener, obviously, we appreciate you for supporting the show. And if this episode helped you, it's your turn. Share it with others. Leave a rating and review on Spotify. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit us up in the comments with your takeaways. If you're on Spotify, go over to YouTube. Either way, as always, remember, leave today better than you found it. Till next time.